Totalitarianism was something I really didn't understand very well until I started to do all the research. You might say, well, why did you do that? Because it became apparent over 3 years. I kept coming to the same conclusion, and I kept pulling back from it, saying, no, it's too big. This cannot be happening at the rate it's happening. But it's actually true, and we now see the evidence arising. And that's that there has been, and there remains, a control of the Western world in particular. That goes way behind all of the government bodies that we've got. It goes behind the agencies they use, the WHO and the UN. It's behind all of that. And it's orchestrated COVID. COVID, we now know, most of the evidence is already there, except, of course, in Ireland, because mainstream media in Ireland is the North Korea of Europe. There is no journalism at all. Died in Q1 2020. RT is a steaming joke. Right, and it's the same boring, nodding donkeys we have as columnists in all of the mainstream newspapers. The editors of those newspapers will not take any counter-narrative documentation from writers like myself. That all stopped dead around April 2020 when I got something into the Examiner, and that was the end of it. I was on the fatwa list from then on. That got me researching what was going on. And what's going on is quite remarkable because Ireland has probably the most underinformed people in Europe when it comes to what's happening. And we also have a particular cultural vulnerability to agnogenesis, which is manufactured ignorance. We displayed that in over 50 years after the Department of Education did a study which showed the amount of abuse that was going on in among certain schools with vulnerable children. So lots of those children were raped, were beaten, and some were murdered over a period because we refused, that the state refused in the 1920s to deal with a document which had investigated it because of Irish exceptionalism. Think about that. 1961, Dr. Lenz in Germany came out and said there's a problem with children with deformities from this particular drug that people are taking, thalidomide. The Brits and the Germans pulled it from the market within weeks. Ireland pulled it off the market 4 years later. And it was 10 years by 1974 before RTE did a documentary on it. We haven't changed. So what I show in my talk is that when the Troika came in and we were too busy looking down on our shoes to see what was going on, Ireland became captive. We became captive to stakeholder capitalism, which is the ideology that Klaus Schwab, who retired yesterday as the head of the World Economic Forum, has been promulgating for so long. His mentor for 18 years was Peter Sutherland, Fine Gael mentor, government mentor and chairman of Goldman Sachs, and also led in his position as the High Commission for Refugees at the time, 2012. He led the whole idea of open borders in Europe. So if you now look at what happened, straight after that, 2013, the Irish civil servants were given the job of formulating the UN Strategic Development Goals. I didn't know any of this stuff, by the way. If you're saying, geez, I've never heard of that before, I'm not surprised. But it's everywhere. So there's 17 of them. You'll see the little circular thing, right? That's them, right? The Irish civil servants and some Kenyans were given that job in 2013 because stakeholder capitalism had come in at that stage. It's why the government in Ireland is surrounded by a swarm of NGOs. And the Irish people have no voice. So we're given the odd bread and circuses election to give us some idea that the Dáil has the power in it. The Dáil has no power in it. It's been handed up to Europe. Europe have handed it up further. That's just the truth of it. We're no longer living in a representative democracy because the objective of stakeholder capitalism is to replace and supplant representative democracy, and they've done it with extraordinary success in Ireland. In 2012, Enda Kenny went to Davos in January 2012, and he told the bondholders and all the billionaires there, they went mad borrowing. They went mad borrowing. It's they are the problem. In other words, he was saying, we've got your back. The bondholders are not going to get punished. He then was on the front cover of Time magazine in October 2012, and 3 days later I was criticising him in the Wall Street Journal, which really pissed off the economic crowd in Ireland. Not because of what I actually said. I described Ireland as a Vichy government, captive on the outside to the bondholders, internally to the union godfathers who were setting their own pay and pensions and securing themselves, and also the banks that were leaning over the shoulders of the Department of Finance to create a bogus Insolvency Act, which continued the power with the banks. I said, this isn't crony capitalism, this is a crony democracy we've got. And so we roll forward. 2015, the UN then adopted the Strategic Development Goals in the summit. That was all Irish handiwork. And where are we now? You know, we're in the top 10 implementing it in the world. Now, if you take the Strategic Development Goals, you go into any AI machine like Grok or anything like that, and you ask it, how many of these Strategic Development Goals cannot be fulfilled without open and lax borders in Europe? They'll tell you 7. 7. In other words, the UN Charter on Strategic Development Goals cannot happen unless we have lax and open borders in Europe. Cannot happen. Now, that's just the reality of it. So on the 26th of June last year, nearly a year ago, I was across the road in Boswell's Hotel doing interviews, and the Irish Parliament sat. All the independent TDs voted against us joining the EU Migration Pact, all of them, because they were taking their instructions from their constituents, but they weren't in the majority. And every single TD from the Uniparty and from the Greens voted to voluntarily join the EU Migration Pact. The Danes couldn't believe it, because they had an opt-out as well. But they weren't going to just voluntarily join it. But we voluntarily joined it. Why would we voluntarily give up control of our borders? God damn it, like, think it through. Why would we do that? Why would these people? Because they're under instructions from above. That's why. It's as plain as the nose in your face. Right, I'll put up the slide. So I just brought one slide. This is it here. Totalitarianism, unlike authoritarianism and tyranny, wants total control. So you can't just back off it. If you back off totalitarianism, it's going to come and take you anyway. It's going to go for everything. It wants total control of humanity. Total control. Not part control, not majority control. Total control. That's its definition. So we saw the totalitarianism of the last century is back in this century with a technology makeover, with a level of power that is all coming now from how we're streamed at. We're all in echo chambers. I keep telling people this, we're all in echo chambers. All of us. I'm in an echo chamber. The only way you can break out of an echo chamber is by doing this, by meeting and talking, which is why I'm doing these monster meetings now. We had one in Cork on the 20th of March and 650 people turned out. And I'm hoping for a larger turnout from the Dublin crowd on Wednesday night in City North Hotel. So we can talk together and get out of our echo chambers. So this is the total control grid here. And what you'll see around here well, let's go on the outside, the vectors of their attack. You're talking here about family, gender, culture. Essentially, you're focusing on education because that's the delivery vehicle. But it's all about breaking the bonds of society, shattering the very definition of how you can't get total control unless you can loosen the bonds of society. We know this from studying the Soviet Union and studying and studying Germany during its period of totalitarianism. It's how it works. So because there has to be total obedience to the centre. And you can't have that if you have a homogenous culture like Ireland with strong family bonds. Why do you think we were asked last year? Why to change the definition of marriage itself into enduring relationships? I mean, come on. Why do you think that was tried? Except the Irish people smelled a rat and said no, did it instinctively, not perhaps in the detail that I've had here. So you actually see then, I'm just flying through these here. So there's a complete diminution of critical thinking worldwide. People don't debate with people anymore because we're self-policing the very words that we use. And we're policing ourselves within our echo chambers and families. And so we go around Now, what's quite clear from COVID-19 was that this was a massive psychological operation. The speculation, the so-called conspiracy theories all turned out to be right. It's already been confirmed effectively by the attack on the deep state in the United States. The CIA, part of it, have gone rogue. The psychological operation has been studied. One of the people that is an expert on this, David Hughes, he's on my channel if you want to have a listen to him. It's also in the book. The book is free online. So you can download it for nothing onto your phone. That's the whole idea, is to try and make it viral. And I've all those interviews in it, so I'm not going to go into the detail today, but I'm just simply saying that we have been the subject of the greatest deception in human history since the fall of Troy in the late Bronze Age. COVID-19 was a complete manufactured psychological event to get 5.5 billion people jabbed. That was its objective. We have studies from Rancor in Canada, from Edward Dowd in Hawaii and his group, all showing the same thing. There was no excess mortality caused by COVID-19. The pathogen wasn't even novel; it was already there, right? And we're being told, as recently as a few months ago, by Uncle Luke and Pat. I call it the Pat Luke Chinese takeaway, the bat takeaway. That it was a bat that flew 1,000 kilometers across China, didn't land anywhere except into the wet market up the road from the Wuhan Institute of Virology and bit some poor Chinaman. It wasn't. It was manufactured. We now have the receipts. We know that $42 million went to Ben Hu, who was a second in command to the Batwoman Xi Zhenli, who headed up the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We know that Professor Ralph Barrick of the University of Capitol Hill, South Carolina and Capitol Hill, he invented the patent that they used in order to weaponize it. And these studies show that most of the damage, most of the excess mortality, that's all over the world, was caused by lockdowns. But yet, we have minutes of no meeting at the WHO. Not a single meeting which actually said we're going to go lockdowns. It seemed to me that the decision was made in Davos. There we go again, Davos, in January 2020, when Sir Jeremy Farrar, who was the head of the Wellcome Trust, stood in for Ghebreyesus, the head of the WHO that day, next to a guy called Richard Hatchett, who was appointed by Bill Gates, who did Event 201 in October 2019, a month after the thing started to circulate for the first time in Wuhan. And then, of course, put $53 million into BioNTech, selling it 2 years later for $1.3 billion. I think it was 13 times return on money. At which point he then admitted that this thing doesn't stop circulation of the virus at all. Sorry about that. And took his money and left. Like, these are the facts. They're all there. They're staring in open sight. But here's my point. We're not engaging with them. We're beyond facts. The Irish race is lulled into a psychotic state by the actual mainstream media we have. We cannot rely on the political establishment. We cannot rely on the media establishment, the scientific establishment. We're on our own, the Irish people. We have to have a peaceful response, but the Irish people have to stand up together, understand the information and get out on the streets and create and bark at them, because it's the only way this place is going to change, because there isn't one single TD in the Dáil today talking this language, despite the fact that all the facts are out there and they're undeniable. The bloody book is free, it's everywhere, and yet nothing has been done. And when you do this work here, exposing what's going on with the with the non-implementation of the Cass report, understand that the thought process behind that whole ideology, that is another contrived vector of attack on the very foundations of society. Call it what it is, because that is what it is. Thank you very much.